and we're talking about student loans in the UK here, not student loans around the whole world, because there are different systems in place. The Sharia is all built upon benefiting people in the dunya, both short-term and long-term, on an individual basis and on a congregational basis in the dunya and in the akhirah. In fact, the Quran criticizes making the halal haram more than it criticizes making the haram halal. What matters truly when trying to understand what Islam has to say about something, we don't just look at what it's called, we look at its reality. Okay, so consideration is given to realities, al-ibratu bil-haqa'iq, and true meanings, not labels and names. Al-hukmu ala shay' far'un an tasawwurihi. Giving a ruling on something is dependent on fully understanding that thing that you want to give a ruling on. This is the only reason why I'm speaking about this in publicly. It's because of how much harm it causes people and how many issues it causes people. Let's say a sister took a student loan and a maintenance loan, and she did her degree and master's and PhD, and she took a tuition fee loan and maintenance loan throughout. And then she was fortunate to marry a multi-millionaire straight after. How much does she pay in student fee loans? How much does she have to repay? Yeah, if she's not working, she pays nothing. A lot of writers on student loans, forget Muslim scholars or fuqaha, a lot of writers, whether economists or experts in finance, don't really view student loans in the UK to be loans. They view them as taxes, graduate taxes they call them, or graduate contributions. You're not in debt. There is no debt. That number that comes up on your account that looks scary, 60,000, 70,000, it means nothing. Wallahi, if that number said 7 million, it would change nothing. Discussing the topic of student loans would be a good idea. And over 8 years ago, I wrote an article on the ruling on student loans. And I discussed it with one of the mashayikh, and when he expressed his opinion and reasoning, I said, okay, I'll write an article, because he didn't have anything in writing. So I said, I'll write an article, and sent it to him. He looked through it, and he was happy with it, and it was published. Since then, there seemed to have been a lot of other content as well, back and forth about the topic. And I've consistently had this question come up. People repeatedly ask the same question. And each time I tell myself I need to do a recorded lecture on this, so that anytime someone asks me again, I can just forward and direct them to it. So this lecture is a summary of a few years of looking into this topic and consulting quite a few people of knowledge. I made sure to consult people of knowledge in this country, and I will explain some of the justifications for that in a minute, inshallah ta'ala. The way this lecture is going to move forward is that first we will talk about some general principles that relate to financial transactions, qawa'id, maxims. Then we will use the student loans question, and we're talking about student loans in the UK here, not student loans around the whole world, because there are different systems in place. Then we will use the student loans question in the UK to try to implement some of those principles practically. And then at the end, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully things will be abundantly clear. If there are still any further questions, we can discuss further. So the first principle that I'd like us to start off with is that Islam came to benefit people in their dunya, not to harm people. Islam came to benefit people. The ultimate reward for a Muslim is in the akhirah. But from Allah's mercy, He's made rulings, halal and haram, in line with what benefits us in this life first. And on top of that, what benefits us in the akhirah. So Allah Ta'ala doesn't command us to do things that have more harm in them than good. Impossible. And Allah doesn't prohibit things that have more benefit in them than harm. Because then that would be an inconsistent sharia and an irrational one. But the sharia is all built upon benefiting people in the dunya, both short-term and long-term, on an individual basis and on a congregational basis in the dunya and in the akhirah. And This is why once somebody came to Mu'adh ibn Jabal, and this hadith is narrated by Ibn Abi Shayba and Imam Ahmad and other scholars, and it's with a decent isnad. Somebody came to Mu'adh ibn Jabal. Mu'adh ibn Jabal is considered one of the most senior scholars of fiqh from the Sahaba. To the extent that Umar ibn Khattab used to say, the most knowledgeable person in halal and haram is Mu'adh ibn Jabal. And it's even narrated as a prophetic hadith with some debate about its authenticity. Okay? So somebody came to Mu'adh ibn Jabal, and this man had accepted Islam. And his relative was a Jew. His relative was a Jew. So he thought that a Muslim doesn't inherit from a non-Muslim. Okay? And that's what the hadith says, and we don't want to go into the topic now. We just want to look at how Mu'adh approached it. So he went to Mu'adh and asked him about, my brother passed away, he's not a Muslim. Do I get anything of his inheritance? So Mu'adh ibn Jabal said, yes, you inherit. I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, Al-Islamu yazidu wa la yanqus. Islam came to increase people, to bring benefit to people, not to take away from them and make life difficult for them. Okay, and Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala says that this incident is narrated with a strong isnad. So this is the first principle. The Sharia came to benefit people, not to harm people. As-Sarakhsi or As-Sarkhasi from the Hanafiya rahimahullah says, know that Allah has made wealth. By the way, that section's for the sisters, yeah? So sisters should know that. Know that Allah has made wealth a cause for the benefit of people in this life, making trade a means to attaining it. Yeah? Trade meaning benefiting from each other through consent, not taking each other's wealth unfairly. So Allah Ta'ala has allowed trade so that people can benefit from it. They can benefit each other, they can benefit themselves. The second principle, so that was the first maxim. The first principle, the first qa'idah is Islam came to benefit people, not to harm people. The second principle is that the default ruling of all financial and social activities is permissibility. The burden of proof is upon the one who says it's haram. We have ibadat and we have mu'amalat or adat. When it comes to ibadah, we touched upon this in yesterday's dars a little bit. When it comes to ibadah, the default rule is that no ibadah is permissible unless legislated by Allah. No one can invent a new act of worship and say, what's the proof that this is haram? What's the proof that this act of ibadah is wrong? We don't need proof. The proof has to be provided by you. The opposite applies to mu'amalat, social activities, transactions, financial activities. Here we say any transaction, any type of trade, all of it is permissible. And if you claim it's not permissible, the burden of proof is upon you. So, if two people are debating, is a certain social activity, a custom, a tradition, okay, a sale, a type of trade, the way a business is set up, the way an institute is set up. Someone says, what's the proof it's permissible to set things up like this? We say the proof is the general concession of the Quran. Okay? The general concession of the Quran. And that is that Allah Ta'ala has made everything on this earth permissible for us. هو الذي جعل لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. Allah Ta'ala has created everything on this earth for the benefit of mankind and under the responsibility of mankind as well. And Allah Ta'ala says, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ وَالطَّيِّبَاتِ مِنَ الرِّزْقِ. Who is it who's prohibited the good things that Allah Ta'ala has brought out for His slaves and the good kinds of provision? No one has the right to make something haram without Allah's permission. And a lot of people think that making halal haram, okay, making the halal haram is not as bad as making the haram halal. Because when you make something halal haram, people sometimes view that as proper, serious, practicing brother or sister. But no, that's a major sin. That's a major sin. Practicing what? Practicing disobeying Allah. In fact, the Quran criticizes making the halal haram more than it criticizes making the haram halal. Because if you make a mistake and make something halal because of misunderstanding or because of wala, at least that's in line with the general principle. And it's in line with the general rule of ease of Islam. When you make something haram, okay, you may be excused. You may be excused if it's a genuine mistake and you did your best. Okay, it's a person of knowledge trying to give a genuine ruling. But you've burdened people. And Allah doesn't like to burden people. Allah doesn't like to burden people. This is explicit in the Quran. It's explicit in the Quran. مَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Allah has not intended or wanted to create burden upon you in your religion. So keep that in mind. Saying that something is haram when in reality you're not sure or it's halal is a major sin. And the same applies to making halal what Allah has made haram. The same applies. It's also a major sin. So what matters is to present exactly what Allah Ta'ala said, exactly what the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, without allowing our own personal desires to play a role, or to allow our personalities to dominate. Because some people's personalities are relaxed. That's fine. But don't allow your relaxed personality to rule the Sharia. And some people are tight. They're tight. They're just generally harsh. A personality. They don't like messing around. They don't like too much talking. So they're inclined towards saying haram or saying this isn't allowed. And that kind of personality, people have different personalities. But don't allow your personality to overtake and to dominate. Who do you associate more with having a tough personality? Abu Bakr or Umar? Huh? Umar. طيب. When Abu Bakr took over the Khilafah and people refused to give zakat, Abu Bakr said if they continue to refuse to give zakat, we'll prepare an army and fight them physically and forcefully take zakat from them. And Umar kept saying to him, كيف تقاتل من يقول لا إله إلا الله? How can you fight people that say لا إله إلا الله? And Abu Bakr says, والله لأقاتلن من فرق بين الصلاة والزكاة. I will fight anyone who distinguishes between salah and zakah. They used to give zakat in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I am now the deputy of the messenger. I'm going to force them to pay zakat. So Abu Bakr didn't allow his soft nature to get the better of him. And Umar didn't allow his tough and strong nature to get the better of him. But both of them said what they believed was Allah's rule. So that's also important to bear in mind. So the general rule is that all things are permissible unless proven otherwise. And this is the position of the vast majority of scholars. In reality, it's more like a consensus. Books of Usul al-Fiqh sometimes mention debates on this topic, but in reality, in practice, it's more of a consensus. Yeah, or close to consensus that this rule applies. Shaykh Zahed ibn Ashur mentions this, before him Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim mentioned it, so many ulama before them also mentioned this principle. So second rule is, all social and financial activities are assumed to be permissible unless proven otherwise. The third maxim is العبرة بالحقائق والمعاني لا بالألفاظ والمباني. And that means that consideration is given to realities, not to labels or names. That's the third maxim. What matters truly when trying to understand what Islam has to say about something, we don't just look at what it's called. we look at its reality. Okay, so consideration is given to realities. العبرة بالحقائق, and true meanings, not labels and names. So, if somebody says, I'm a Muslim, but I'm not so sure that Allah has sent any prophets or messengers, do we look at his name or his reality? Reality. Claim Muslim as much as you want, but it's not possible to be a Muslim if you're negating prophethood. It's impossible. Somebody comes to the masjid, and this has happened. They want to get married. A Muslim man wants to marry a Christian woman. She says, I am Christian. I don't believe Jesus is God or a prophet, but I'm a Christian. Are we allowed to have that marriage go through? She's not a Christian. In reality. She's not a Christian. What kind of Christian is this? Even if she claims it, even if she claims to be Christian, we look at reality. If two people say we're married, we're husband and wife, but there was no marriage contract between them, and there was no wali, and there were no witnesses. Okay, they just met up and said, why don't we get married? Yeah, that's a good idea. Do we treat them as a married couple? We don't treat them as a married couple. Because there's no reality to this. So we look at the reality of that thing. If a company that sells water puts on the label and says, unfortunately, this water isn't halal, or this water is not halal certified, do we look at what they're calling it, or do we look at its reality? Reality. We say, that label means nothing. If this is water, unless you've done something to this water which turns it haram, okay, this is water, it's halal. Whether you call it halal or not doesn't matter. Does this principle make sense? Let's use an example from trade or financial transactions. I say to Muhammad, any of the four Muhammads in front of me, okay, all seem to be Muhammad. I say, I'm going to give you this phone as a gift. Okay? I'm going to give you this phone as a gift. All you have to give me is £1. Yeah? You just have to give me £1. Is that a good deal or not? It's a good deal. Is it basically a gift? It's basically a gift. But because I required £1 from you, it becomes a trade. It becomes a sale. Fiqh, the Sharia doesn't view it as a gift anymore. Even though in my mind it's a gift, in your mind it's a gift. Maybe I just wanted that £1 because I need it for a shopping trolley or something. Whatever reason. In my mind it's a gift, in your mind it's a gift. Everyone thinking says, wow, that's a generous gift, that. But in the Sharia it doesn't count as a gift. It doesn't count as a gift. If you invest money into something and you're told that you earn 5% interest on this investment, and it's a valid investment, it's a permissible investment in Sharia. They're calling the profit interest. But in reality, it's just profit. Does that become prohibited because the word interest is used? Or do we look at the reality of the contract and reality of the circumstance? We look at the reality of the thing. Just because the word interest is used, that doesn't make it. Allah didn't prohibit the word interest. Allah prohibited riba. In fact, even if something is interest by law, that doesn't mean it's riba. That doesn't mean it's riba. Okay? Sometimes you want to buy a phone. This costs £100, let's say. But if I buy it in installments, it's going to cost me £120. I'm going to pay it in 3 installments, £40 a month. Okay? So, which one's going to cost more, paying in installments or buying it up front? Paying installments. How much more? £20, yeah? £20 more. Some contracts call that interest. They'll say you're going to be paying £20 interest. This is the amount of interest. In the Sharia, that's not riba. It's got nothing to do with riba. completely permissible. I want to sell you this in installments for 500, up front for 100. It's up to me. It's my phone. I can sell it forever, whatever I want. I can raise the price, I can drop the price. And so long as we are clear with each other. And a lot of people think that's riba, by the way, which is incorrect. It has nothing to do with riba, because I have the right to sell this for a certain price, and I have the right to sell it for another price. So long as we're clear from the beginning, this is the total amount. I'm not going to come to you after 3 months and say, you missed the payment, I'm going to charge you another £20 on top. Here, this becomes problematic. Okay? But if all the matter is, you buy this phone for 120 in installments, there's no riba in that at all. Even if they call that interest. Okay? So that principle is important to lay down. I'm going to continue with a few more things and then I could come to any questions if that's okay. In fact, sometimes the nature of something, a transaction, can change because something has changed, which means the reality has changed. For example, the Hanbali scholars say, if I give you something as a ariyah, which means I'm keeping some money safe with you to take care of it. Yeah? Take care of it. Here's £100. However, they say if you give that person, if I give you permission to now use that £100, if you want to, use that £100, but give it back to me in a few months' time when I'm back from my travels. They say it goes from being a ariyah to being a loan, to being a qard. Even though initially you didn't ask me for a loan. Yeah? Does that make sense or not? You didn't ask me for a loan. I just told you, here's £100, please take care of it. I'm traveling. When I come back, I want that money. You call me up and say, by the way, is it okay if I use that £100? I've kept it in a safe, but are you okay with me using it? Then when you come back, I'll give you £100. And I say, yeah, don't worry about it, no problem. It goes from being a ariyah, which is keeping something, you keeping something for me, to being a qard, to being a loan. Okay, that's what the position of the Hanbali madhab is on this issue. Which means they've given consideration to what? Words or realities? Realities. Yeah, it wasn't technically a loan. You didn't even request a loan to begin with. But because I'm allowing you to use it, it becomes a loan. It becomes a qard. So this is the third very important principle, which is that realities is what matter, not names. Okay? Someone says ginger beer is haram because of the word beer. See, we don't look at names, we look at reality. Does it intoxicate or not? No, permissible. Okay? If someone calls something, anything they call it what you want. We're concerned with reality. Another important maxim is that giving a ruling on something is contingent upon understanding its reality. Okay, and the fuqaha say, al-hukmu ala shay' far'un an tasawwurihi. Giving a ruling on something is dependent on fully understanding that thing that you want to give a ruling on. So let's say a scholar turns around and says, tea is haram. Why? Because it intoxicates. And then quotes the verses and hadith about intoxication and the harms and the rational, the dangers of intoxication and so on. We say, hold on. We're not questioning you on these verses and hadith, but you've not understood how tea works. You've not understood the reality of the impact that tea has. It doesn't intoxicate. So just because he quoted verses and hadith, where did he go wrong? On understanding the reality of the thing that he's giving a ruling on. Does that make sense? And this is why we say it's important when people give fatwa, especially when it concerns something that involves people's customs, people's lifestyles, people's traditions. It is better for there to be a mufti from that community who understands custom. Because one word in my country might mean a different word in another country. This in my country might mean something else in someone else's country. So if I call up a mufti from miles away and ask him, is this such and such thing permissible? What comes to his mind? The reality that he's used to, not the reality in your country. Circumstances that he's used to, not the circumstances that you're used to. And a sound fatwa can only be based on understanding context. And this is why, before presenting this lecture, I contacted more than 10 different mashayikh in this country. All in this country, or have lived a long time in this country, and gave them my reasoning in full and consulted them. And of all the ones that got back to me, and that's more than 10, none of them, alhamdulillah, had an objection to what I said, except one. Except one of them, he said, I still believe the student loans are prohibited because they are loans. Okay. And I consulted some of the well-known mashayikh in this country, including our mufti here in Birmingham, Shaykh Uthman Shushan, and our mufti and our Shafi'i mufti here in Birmingham, Shaykh Muhammad Sa'idi, and our Maliki mufti, Shaykh Ammar al-Shanqiti in London, and Shaykh Muhammad Ali Bla'u in Birmingham. I consulted Shaykh Abdullah Judai as well, former head of the European Council of Fatwa and Research. Shaykh Haytham al-Haddad, I spoke to him again. I spoke to him before about this topic. I spoke to Shaykh Sajid Ahmed Omar, who also wrote an article on the topic. But I presented the arguments here that I mentioned, and he fully supported the judgment and conclusion as well. So I made sure that I consulted people who have already looked into this. But if I call somebody up who lives in Jeddah, or in Morocco, or in Egypt, and I say, Shaykh, there's this, in the UK we have student loans. A student takes a loan from the government, okay, to pay for his education or her education, and then they have to pay it back with riba, with interest. Is this halal or haram? What's the mufti going to say to you? Haram. If you called me up and said that to me, I'd say it's haram as well. Because you've left the mufti no choice. You've said he's paying back riba. He's going to tell you, yeah, it's fine, riba is not a big deal. Of course he's going to say it's haram. And so that doesn't suffice. That doesn't suffice as a fatwa. Doesn't matter how big the name of this scholar is. Doesn't matter how big the name of the scholar is. What matters is, have they fully investigated this issue? I'm not saying that it's wrong for someone who lives outside the UK to give a fatwa. No, of course not. But it's a requirement that they fully understand what they're talking about. And a lot of the time, that's not the case. And I've seen clips like this, where a mufti or a shaykh is relying upon a 1-minute summary from the questioner. Give me a quick summary and I'll give you a ruling. We asked the shaykh from this country and he said it's haram, and then that circulated. More is needed than that. More is needed than just a brief description of something. So this principle is really, really essential. Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the biggest imams in the history of Islam, a man of zuhud, a man of righteousness and ibadah, and a man of fiqh. He's considered one of the senior muftis and shuyukh in Iraq and Kufa in his time, around the time of Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa. And one of the beautiful statements that he makes is, he says, al-fiqhu al-rukhsatu min thiqah. True fiqh, true understanding of the deen is a concession from a reliable person. Okay? Meaning, making things easy for people if that person is reliable. Because an unreliable person making things easy is problematic. He says, وَأَمَّا التَّشْدِيدِ فَيُحْسِنُهُ كُلُّ أَحَدٍ. As for being strict and harsh, anyone can do that. You don't need to be a alim to be harsh. You just take the harsher option every time. It's easy. Okay, but fiqh is to provide people with solutions. And there are countless ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ provides people with solutions based on knowledge. Whilst other people were giving harsh solutions, sometimes even harming people. sometimes even harming people. And a woman gave birth, Subayya al-Islamiyya gave birth, just after her husband passed away, and somebody said to her, "You're not allowed to get married until you wait for 4 months and 10 days. So why are you dressing up? Looks like you're already hoping for someone to propose to you." This is what one of the companions said to her. So she went to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him. She said, "I gave birth only a few days after my husband passed." He said, "Tazawwaji, if you want to get married, get married." A concession. It's a Shari'i concession, right? He didn't make that up. It's in the Quran. It's a Shari'i concession. Okay. Similarly, when somebody, had an injury and it was freezing cold, and requested some kind of advice from people, did he have to make ghusl or not? They said you have to make ghusl. There's no way out. Take the safer option. Take the safe option. Okay. Remember, this is salah. This is important. Take it seriously. And then the Prophet ﷺ, when the case was taken to him, said, "قَتَلُوهُ قَتَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ." They killed him. May Allah kill them. هَلَّا سَأَلُوا إِذَا لَمْ يَعْلَمُ. If they didn't know, why didn't they ask? Why didn't they ask? So giving a stricter option just because it seems like it's better for taqwa or better for religion isn't always correct. It has its place, but it's more of an individual thing. As for general fatwa, general guidance, general rulings, then that's where keeping people's circumstances in mind becomes very important. And anyway, this is the only reason why I'm speaking about this publicly. It's because of how much harm it causes people and how many issues it causes people. Some people traveled, a few years ago some people traveled from another city. And one brother said, "I have 4 children. I've paid off the university fees, tuition fees of one of them. But I'm realizing I can't do this another 3 times. So I wanted to discuss with you the ruling on student loans because I heard you wrote about this or something. And some of the students that I used to teach used to work part-time jobs, some of them sisters, part-time jobs. And some of them working at night just so that they can pay off their studies. So is there a need to address this issue on a wider scale? Of course there is, no doubt about it. Okay, now, firstly, how does the student loan system work in the UK? Since we said we need to understand it first before. Fees in the UK now for most universities are costing around £9,000 a year. Maybe just a little bit more than that. And there is a government-owned organization, okay, called the Student Loans Company. The Student Loans Company gives the option of paying the tuition fees on behalf of students and giving them a maintenance loan as well on top of that. Okay. And if those students graduate and start earning a salary above a threshold on Plan 2, because there are different plans, on Plan 2 right now, that threshold is just over £27,000. So if somebody starts to earn £27,000, they will start to pay back 9% of anything on top of the 27,000. So let's say they're earning, I think it's 27,295, something like that. Let's say someone's earning a salary of 28,295. How much are they above the threshold? £1,000. How much will they pay per year? 9%, which is £90, yeah? £90? £90 per year, which is what per month? Approximately £7 or something, £7, £8 a month. Okay, that's how it works. If you spend the rest of your life earning 27,000, okay, then there's nothing to pay off. And if 30 years pass by, then even if you start earning 170,000 after that 30 years, okay, be a great coincidence. If you start to earn £170,000 after that 30 years, you still have to pay nothing back because the 30-year period is over. Okay, the new plan I think is 40 years. But for most people, it's 30 years. Okay, at least in the past 10 years. Also, if somebody reaches the age of 65, okay, whichever one happens first, 30 years or 65, then this loan, what they call a loan, and I'm going to explain in a minute why it doesn't really qualify as a loan in fiqh. This loan is wiped out. If a person passes away, it's wiped out as well. If a person marries a very rich person, let's say a sister took a student loan and a maintenance loan, and she did her degree and master's and PhD, and she took a tuition fee loan and maintenance loan throughout, and then she got, she was fortunate to marry a multi-millionaire straight after that. How much does she pay in student fee loans? How much does she have to repay? 9% of what? Yeah, if she's not working, she pays nothing. Nothing. And I'm going to chase her husband over it, or her parents. She pays nothing. So they look at her salary. Okay. If someone's lucky enough to be given a £100,000 cash gift, and they leave it with them in the house, are you going to get a phone call from the student loans company saying, we heard about that, by the way. We've got people listening out for these kinds of things. Pay up your fees. They won't do that. Even if you told them, by the way, I was gifted this. Say, good for you, congratulations. Okay. This also applies to someone who, might qualify for some kind of disability. What's the word? Support, okay, or allowances from the government. So if someone has some kind of severe disability, this loan, okay, which they're calling a loan, is also wiped out. Now, what's the objective of a loan? What's a qard? The Islamic understanding of a qard is what? Assistance, yeah? To help someone in need. Okay, to help somebody in need. Good. And what's the assumption of a qard? If I'm helping you because you're in need, you're in circumstances which are difficult for now, I'm helping you with money. What's the assumption from me? You're going to pay me back, right? Same amount or more? Same amount. Okay, that's the Islamic conception of a qard. Right. Can I place some kind of condition on you? As in I can say, look, you don't need to pay me back until after 6 months. Then start paying me back in installments. Can I do that? Yeah, I can. Is it still a qard? Still a qard. Can I say to you, when you finally find a job, okay, and you start earning money, start paying me back a little bit in installments. Is that reasonable? That's reasonable. Okay, let's say I find out my salary is 50 grand a year, let's say, yeah? It's not, but let's say it is. Okay, speak to these guys. Let's say it is £50,000 a year. And then I realize this guy who I've just been helping has £400 million in Bitcoin and other investments. What would be my assumption? Do you think my expectation would be? Maybe. Okay, but let's say I'm a Muslim and I don't want to get into Riba. Give me my money. What do you mean if I'm looking for a job? You got 400 million in Bitcoin. Yeah, pay me back. Sell some Bitcoin and give me that money back. Sell some of your stocks and give me that money. You want me to be here grafting on minimum wage whilst you're looking for a job with all these investments? Is it reasonable to expect me to say, no, you said if he gets a job. So long as he doesn't have a job then. Okay. But that's how student loans in reality work in this country. That's how student loans in reality work, which is why a lot of writers on student loans, forget Muslim scholars or fuqaha, a lot of writers, whether economists or experts in finance, don't really view student loans in the UK to be loans. They view them as taxes. Graduate taxes, they call them, or graduate contributions. Shaykh Abdullah Judai says it's like a takaful system. A takaful system. Now, if we look at this as a loan, It's easy to come to the conclusion that there's riba involved, isn't there? Because the amount that you've borrowed, which is let's say £27,000 per year for a degree, for a 3-year degree, you borrowed £27,000 altogether. Let's say you took another 15,000 in maintenance loans, okay, or 17,000. Altogether, you took how much? Huh? Okay, let's say just over 40. Just over 40. Is that figure of 40,000 going to increase over the years? It's going to increase on your balance, yeah? If you log into your student loans account and you look at it, it's going to say maybe 43, 44. In a few years' time, it'll be 50. A few years' time, it'll be 65. So I'm expected to pay 65, but I only borrowed 40. Does that sound like interest? Does that sound like riba? Sounds like riba, yeah? Okay. If we don't view it as a loan, but we view it as a graduate tax, in other words, the government has funded my education, it's supported my education, okay? Call it loan, call it grant, call it maintenance, tuition, whatever. The main thing is they funded my studies, okay? If I start to earn money, I'm going to pay taxes anyway, right? I want to pay national insurance, I'm going to pay taxes. Isn't that right? Some money might go towards my pension. Another point is going to be added to my taxes, and that's student loan repayments. And if you get a pay slip, those of you who get pay slips and work for companies, whatever, you'll see that all these things come up, including student loans. Now, if it's a tax, do I need to sit there and compare how much did I borrow, how much am I paying back? Or is it just a tax I'm paying? There's no issue. And that's why when we pay taxes, does some of that go towards the NHS? Sure. Does anyone sit and calculate how much treatment did I get from the NHS? And how much have I paid in taxes? If I paid more taxes than the treatment that I got from the NHS, that's riba. Does anyone do that? No one does that. Okay. Why does no one do that? Because it's not borrowing, it doesn't involve borrowing money or in reality lending money, or I'm benefiting from a government service, a public service. If I start to earn money, I'm going to pay a little bit more tax. That's all it is. Okay, and there's somebody who talks a lot on different finance-related issues in the UK called Martin Lewis. He's got Money Saving Expert. Who's heard of moneysavingexpert.com? He talks a lot about different mortgages and loans and benefits, whatever. And he consistently says in his writings and articles and his lectures, he says we need to stop calling student loans. They're not loans. These are graduate contributions or graduate taxes. Okay? And what happens to your student loan repayment? Who does it go to? HMRC, who's responsible for taxes. Straight to them. What do? They send it to the student loans company. Is the student loans company separate from the government or government body? It's a government body. It's providing a public service for people. It's supporting people's education. Just like the NHS, the police service, the fire alarm, the fire services, the ambulance, these are all public services. People have access to them. The government is also supporting people's education. But it's requiring, for those who are higher earners, to pay a kind of tax in return. Let's have a quick idea. Let's have a quick look at what riba is. I am going to come to questions, so please take note of them, but I want to finish the ideas first. Let's talk about riba, what riba is in the Quran, and then compare it to the system that we have here to see if there's some resemblance. Allah Ta'ala prohibited riba in the Quran. There's no doubt about it. It's a major sin. The Prophet ﷺ considers it a major sin. Did Allah mention any kind of reasoning behind why riba may be prohibited? Yes, 2 reasons. Does anyone know? That's like a punishment. But what's the reason for prohibition to begin with? Good. It involves dhulm, right? Yeah? يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا إن كنتم مؤمنين فإن لم تفعلوا فأذنوا بحرب من الله ورسوله وإن تبتم فلكم رؤوس أموالكم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. Don't do injustice and don't be mistreated. So the idea of dhulm is an essential part of riba. Also, consuming people's wealth without right. Okay, it involves consuming people's wealth without right. Taking advantage of the weak. And that's why Allah Ta'ala mentions riba as the opposite of what? Trade. And in another ayah, riba is the opposite of sadaqah. Good. قَالَ يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى وَيُرْبِي الصَّدَقَاتِ. Allah gets rid of any blessing that's built upon riba, and He increases the blessing of sadaqah. And He says in the context of riba, وَإِن كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ, if someone owes you money, but they're struggling to pay you back, what are we required to do? فَنَظِرَةٌ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ. Then delay them until things are easy for them. What's the second option we could do? Take advantage of them. Okay? And that's what the Arabs used to do in Jahiliyyah. Imam Malik narrates in his Muwatta that Zayd ibn Aslam describes what riba is in Jahiliyyah. He says, if somebody owed another person money, when the time of repayment was due, he would say, Ataqli am turbi. You're going to pay me back? Your time is due now. It's been 6 months. It's been a year. Are you going to repay me? Or are you going to accept me adding riba? And if he can't repay, what's he going to say? He says, add riba. I'll pay you back with an addition. He comes back again next time, still struggling, an addition. Isn't that what a lot of the systems today are built upon? Taking advantage of the weak? How do people get into credit cards, debts and different other types of debts like that? It's based on that system of taking advantage of people's need. Whereas the Quranic command is to delay them, make things easy for them. Is that clear? طيب. And this type of riba is the most severe type of riba, and it's mentioned in the Quran. Now, a person who's charging riba wants some kind of benefit. Yeah, they want some kind of benefit. They want some kind of profit. The Student Loans Company is a non-profit government organization. Okay, that's the first thing. Is it possible for somebody in the UK to go into serious debt because of their student loans? What do you guys think? Why are you saying no? Firstly, you don't have to pay if you don't have the money. So is this more like sadaqah or more like riba? More like sadaqah. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah accept. Okay? That's the first thing. Let's say somebody is starting to have a decent salary and he's starting to pay. He's starting to repay. They're saying repay, and we're saying, according to the argument that we're going by here at least, we're saying pay. You're just paying a tax. Can you ever go into debt? Huh? So can student loan repayments in the UK ever lead you into further debt and then, being bankrupted? It's impossible. The system is designed for that to be impossible. It can never happen. Because if you're earning a higher salary, let's say somebody says, because this question comes up a lot, what if I end up paying 60,000 and in reality my degree only costs 30,000? What's the answer? The answer is congratulations, because it means you have a high salary. You're not going into debt. You're not struggling. The system doesn't take people into desperate circumstances. The only people that struggle with stress from student loan repayments are the ones that don't really understand it. In fact, I heard of somebody who wasn't even earning the minimum threshold. He got so stressed out about student loans. This was a non-Muslim. He got so stressed out about student loans, he made voluntary repayments. Yeah, you don't even have to pay to begin with. You're not in debt. There is no debt. That number that comes up on your account that looks scary, 60,000, 70,000, it means nothing. Wallahi, if that number said 7 million, it would change nothing. Change nothing. Because you're only required to pay a percentage of your salary. Let's say I did a 3-year degree, 27 grand, with no maintenance loans. And Muhammad does a 6-year degree, okay, with maintenance loans. He borrowed, according to the contract, he borrowed 100,000. 30,000, 100,000. Who's going to be paying more in student loans, repayments? Me or him? Him. Agreed? The one who earns more. It doesn't matter. If I have £1 in student loans, he has £1 million in student loans, and I'm working and he's not, I'm going to pay more than him. I'm going to pay off that pound with the interest, which they're calling interest, and we're viewing it as a tax. Because it's about salary. It's got nothing to do with how much you borrowed, or whether there's debt, or whether there's a loan. And that's why it's important to move away from viewing it as a debt. A debt riba involves taking advantage of people. Riba involves putting people in circumstances that where they're struggling and you make things harder for them. Does this system sound like making things harder for people or making things easy for people? This system is actually facilitating things for people. It's not making things harder for people. Now, yes, if you're earning a lot of money, you may end up paying a lot. But it's still going to be proportional to your salary. So if you're paying £10,000 a year in student loans, mashallah, that means that your salary is well into the 6 figures. So again, proportionally, it won't have much of an impact on you. Yeah, so this is important to keep in mind. If we say riba is about dhulm, it's about taking advantage of people's wealth. Okay? It's about not making things easy for them when they're struggling. Well, none of these things are problems for the student loan system in the UK. In the US, it might be a different discussion. Okay? People are crying day and night over there about student loans. Okay? So the system is different. And the ruling that I'm talking about here is about the UK student loans and any other European country that has a similar system. Okay, so that's that. Now, coming towards the end, before opening up, inshallah, any discussions. If we view this as a loan, I took 30,000, I'm paying back 60,000. I'm going to call it what? Riba. It's a loan, borrowed money, and repaid it. Some scholars said that's riba and therefore it's haram. Some contemporary scholars said that technically is riba, but we're still going to make it permissible for those who need that. And that was the kind of approach that the European Council took in one of its fatwa. They said that because education is a widespread need and this will harm the wider Muslim community if they're missing out on important education. Yeah, for an individual, remember, this fatwa is not based on an individual thing. If you don't go to university, are you going to die? Is it possible for you to make a decent living without going to university? It's possible, yeah? But this fatwa is not based on individual circumstances. It's based on looking at the general Muslim public and saying, you might not suffer as an individual, but if Muslims at large are prevented from higher education, will that impact the Muslim community as a whole? Weaken it, reduce its education, reduce its monetary power and so on? They said yes. Therefore, in this situation, they allowed them. I'm not going down this route. I'm not going down the route of student loans are permissible out of necessity. I'm saying student loans are permissible when there's no necessity. Because it's not riba to begin with. It's not a loan to begin with. And therefore, even if someone says, I have 30 grand in my savings account. Okay? I want to start a business, but I also want to go to university. Okay? Or I want to do something with this money, important, but I also want to go to university. Is it permissible for me to take a student loan? The answer is yes. Even if you have the money available. Now, if you go by this fatwa of necessity, they're going to say, no, you've got the money, you need to pay it. Because student loans are only permissible out of necessity. But the position that I'm presenting here, and that I consulted quite a few ulama on, is that there is no riba to begin with. So even if you have the money, you take student loans. And I personally don't encourage people to work extra hard and put money away to forcefully pay for their education if the government is offering to pay for their education. Take the government support on covering people's education. Take that support. It's free support. It doesn't involve riba. It doesn't involve taking a loan. It won't put you into debt. So you're good. And like I said, that's a system. So in reality, we can say the student loan system in the UK is either a graduate tax system, just like a tax. It goes through the tax system. Does anyone know when you start repaying student loans? Yeah, that's true, when you start earning a salary, but in terms of date, when do they start counting this 30-year period or 40-year period? And when do they start requiring you to pay after work? It's the April after you graduate, okay? Is April significant? What does it imply? Yeah, tax year as well, yeah? Financial year, tax year. Again, supporting the idea that this is a tax, going through the tax system. It's going through the tax system. Student loans company will not knock at your door and say, where's our money? It's automatically taken out of your salary, just like taxes are. There is something called alternative student finance. This is a proposal by the government to allow access to education, higher education, for people who don't want to take interest loans. And I had a look at this proposal. Do you know how it's different from the current system? There is no difference. The amount you're entitled to is the same. The amount you repay is the same. There is no, because they can't say Muslims take loans but with no interest, and you guys, because you're not Muslims, you take loans but you pay interest. They can't do that. Okay. So what's the solution? The solution is take out the scary words that are scaring me and you. Loan, okay, repayment, debt, interest. Take out the scary words and put in an Arabic word that sounds, like deep fiqh. So they said this is a takaful system. And it is. I would say even if you don't use that word, we're still saying it's a takaful system. Even if you use the word interest there. And I'm okay with that. Because even if some Muslims are just worried about the terms, interest and so on, and we change that to have more people accessing it, alhamdulillah, good. But we're saying in reality, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. You're entitled to the same amount, not a penny more, and you're paying back exactly the same amount, not a penny more or a penny less. The only thing that's changed is the words being used. If the only thing that's changed is the words being used, can we say it was haram then and now it's halal? It doesn't make sense, because we said before, what matters is what? Words and names or realities? Realities. So if we turn around and say the new government initiative approach that they're suggesting and proposing, I don't think it's in place yet, that's halal, but the previous system is haram, that means you've made two things that are exactly the same, one halal, one haram. It's contradictory. The Sharia doesn't contradict itself. The Sharia doesn't make things halal and haram just based on words, names, reality. Sometimes there can be similarity, yes. Sometimes there can be similarity. But something has to be different for the ruling to change. But if everything's entirely the same, then that's problematic. So in reality, the current student loan system is a graduate tax system, or a graduate contribution system, or like we can call it a takaful system. Takaful means what? Takaful means all of us want to study at university. So the student loans company is going to cover our education. Okay? But the government doesn't have unlimited funding, so it wants people to pay towards this pot. Okay? This education pot. So that the next batch of students can also study for free, basically. So what are they going to require from us, me and you who benefited from a higher education system? If we're earning higher salary, pay something towards it. Depending on your salary. You might pay £20 a month, £40 a month, £100 a month, depending on your salary. That contribution goes into this pot. Who uses that pot? Is it the government to buy fish and chips? No, it goes back into people's education. That's exactly how takaful works. That's exactly how takaful works. Okay, we take money from people that have benefited from the system. We use that money to fund the next batch of students that want to study. Okay, and that's how that system works. Finally, why did the government avoid calling it a graduate tax instead of saying, graduate tax, calling it a student loan? Why did they do that? Because the word tax sounds draining. People are already complaining about taxes. Okay, and that's what some finance experts suggested and argued. They said that because there's a fear of adding more taxes. We say, okay, more taxes is not a good thing. We're not supporting it. But at least it doesn't impact the fiqh ruling. And at least it makes it permissible. And for the vast, vast majority of Muslims, are they benefiting from the student loan system or are they being harmed? 99% of them are benefiting. And even those who are paying more, in reality they're not being harmed because it was through their studies that they were able to get higher salaries to begin with. So don't look at how much am I paying, how much am I getting, how much am I paying back. There's no paying or paying back. Education is being funded by the government. You do have to apply for it, but education is being funded. When you start earning good money, then you contribute something in return. If somebody's earning £30,000 a year, how much are they paying? In student loan repayments, they're paying about £20. Is £20 a month of a tax that much of a big deal compared to the education that somebody gets? Okay. If someone's earning 40,000, they may be paying slightly more than that, let's say 40, 50 pounds a month. These are just estimates, we need to do the maths. Is that much of a big deal for someone who's benefited significantly from free education? Okay, it's not a big deal. And so, if somebody said to me, this is black and white riba, there is no doubt about it, no question, but I'm going to benefit from it, I'd say no. Even if you benefit from it, keep away from riba. But if something brings benefit to the wider Muslim population, and it doesn't bring harm, and if it does, it's so limited, and it doesn't resemble riba at all, and it resembles other systems like a graduate tax or takaful system more than a loan system, and we say the default rule is permissibility in Sharia, why would we still say it's haram? Now, if someone said, I'm not going to take student loan because I want to be on the safe side, I'm going to pay for it myself, may Allah reward you. That's fine. It's a positive intention. Okay? But I do not advise people to burden themselves in order to pay for something that they already have government support for. In fact, I don't even encourage taking loans from family and friends. Some people recommend that. Even some mashayikh, they say, if you can borrow money from family and friends to pay it off, instead of taking student loans, I don't even encourage that. Because the student loan system isn't breathing down your neck. Where's my money? Where's my money? Your friends and family are going to be breathing down your neck. You sit down for dinner, okay, you talk to them about holiday that you went to, or you buy a nice new car. Oh, okay, so you do have money. And there's going to be pressure on you for the rest of your life until you've paid off your family and friends. And the Sharia doesn't want to humiliate people. The fuqaha even allowed people to miss Jumu'ah and Jama'ah in the masjid. Okay? If the only masjid available has people who they owe money and they don't have the money to pay them back. Imagine that. Let's say this masjid was the only masjid available to us to pray Jumu'ah. And I owe Muhammad money. And I know he's going to be here at the masjid. The Sharia has allowed me to miss Jumu'ah because of that. Huh? You know. No, but that means the Sharia is giving importance to people's self-respect. I don't want to come to the masjid every single week and be humiliated. Okay, and giving me stares and I have to look away and pretend I didn't see him. So I don't even really encourage taking loans from family and friends to pay student loans. Because you're putting yourself, that's where the stress is. That's the whole reason why riba is prohibited. Because of the burden and the stress involved and the worry. Where is the system that we have available here? None of that applies. None of that applies. I'm not saying taking a student loan is the best financial decision. Okay? I'm not a financial expert. I wish I was. I'm not saying that it's always the best decision for every single one of you. You make your own decision. But I'm talking fiqh here. This is a fiqhi ruling. But you make your own decision. If your family is multi-millionaires and they can pay off your education like that, alhamdulillah. None of this stuff even concerns you. Probably not even sat here. Why would you even sit here? Okay? So it may not be the best financial decision for you. You make your mind up about that. But from a fiqh perspective, it's completely permissible. Wallahu a'lam. And therefore, it's permissible to take even if there is some kind of other alternative. And that's something that you keep in mind. The final thing, and I've said this, the word final thing, like 4 times now. I will come to questions. The government website itself, when talking about student loans, in one segment that I was having a look at earlier this week, it gives the option of voluntary repayments. Okay? So you don't have to pay anything, but you say, I want to voluntarily pay back because I want to wipe this thing out as quickly as possible. They explicitly say, think carefully about whether this is the best decision for you. Because you may not have to pay anything off to begin with. So then you'd voluntarily be paying money for no reason, basically. So the system is designed to facilitate things for people. So if somebody turns around and says, you know what? I'm going to do a degree and a master's and PhD, and I'm pretty confident I'm not going to work. And this is likely for Muslim sisters, especially ones who are already married at university, maybe they have kids and whatever. I know for sure I'm not going to be working full time for the next 30 years. So she's quite confident, it could be a man of course, but we're using this as an example. So she's quite confident she won't pay anything back. Is it immoral for her to take student loans and benefit from the education system? Not at all. Not at all. Even if you know 100% you're not going to pay back a penny, benefit from the education. And congratulations. It's free, it's legal, it's halal, it's permissible. What other words can we use? Wallahu a'lam. And we say, Allahumma rabba Jibreel wa Mika'ila wa Israfil, Fatir as-samawati wal-ard, alim al-ghaybi wa-shahada, anta tahkumu bayna ibadika fima kanu fihi yakhtalifun. اهدنا لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. Any comments or questions? I had one here and then some here and then
This was the sisters,
mic to them, yeah, sure.
And also if they want to, some sisters would like to invite
Right,
question,
no problem at all.
And Shaykh Zahed will repeat the question every time, just so that we all benefit, inshallah.
Yeah.
The first principle about Sharia came to benefit people. Does that apply for like mortgage? Because the mortgage loan is benefit people, but the home pay all that for the bank has
Yeah, it's a good question. See, the question is the principle of the Sharia came to benefit people, not to harm them. Does that apply to mortgages as well? Firstly, I'm going to excuse myself from now from going into detail on any other fiqhi mas'ala. Okay? So questions to do with mortgages or questions to do with insurance or anything like that, unless it relates to comparing it to the student loans system, which I'm going to do now. When we say Islam came to benefit people, not to harm them, that's a Shari'i principle established in the Quran, Sunnah and Fiqh of the Sahaba. That doesn't mean that's the only principle. It doesn't mean that's the only thing we look at. Okay? The reason we've argued that student loans are permissible is not only because there's benefit in it, but because there's benefit and minimal harm, and it doesn't resemble a loan, and doesn't really involve riba, doesn't involve riba at all, and so on. Now with mortgages, the system is not exactly the same. If mortgages were treated the same way, there was a government body that was giving people housing and you didn't have to pay it back unless you're earning a certain amount of money, and all the rules applied, we'd say permissible. And that's just the government being generous. But because the system is very different, here we are talking about a genuine loan. Here we're talking about, and I'm not commenting on it being permissible or impermissible now, I'm just saying the two are different.
Okay, another question regarding, you call it yes, so that everyone gets, in this case, that everyone gets a chance, please.
We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. Keep that question.
Everyone says this one.
Is it connected to this one?
Yeah.
We'll give him a... Yeah.
It's case study. Like, for example, I graduated, I've got loan 27K, I get job 60K. Yeah? This 60K, I will pay 9% after 27K, right?
Yeah.
I pay about 250 a month.
Okay.
Yeah. In 10 years, I pay over.
Okay.
This is, you call it as tax regulation. It's not tax regulation, but after 10 years, there is no tax. So with tax, there is no time.
That's right. So again, he's saying that you're calling it a tax, okay, or you're calling it a graduate contribution or whatever. But after a period of time, you no longer have to pay it off, okay, if you've paid it completely off, okay, including the interest that they say they add. We say a graduate tax can have conditions, and a graduate contribution can have conditions, meaning the government can require people to pay a tax, but put conditions on them and say this tax only applies to you for this period of time, or this tax only applies to certain people, like those who benefited from the education system. So it's a tax with conditions, or it's a graduate tax or a graduate contribution, in which case we don't need to call it a tax, it's a contribution. And your contribution is based on so and so. And look, we're not claiming that there is no element of a loan at all. Okay? I'm not saying there's no element of a loan, and how can you even think of it as a loan? No, of course. They're calling it a loan, so obviously there's going to be some resemblance with a loan. But the question is, does it resemble a qard more, or does it resemble a graduate tax or graduate contribution or a takaful system more? I'm saying it resembles this more. It doesn't resemble a loan more. And the fuqaha say, and some of the early ulama of usul, okay, al-Mawardi from the Shafi'i fuqaha and before, have said that if a mas'ala, if a fiqhi issue resembles two different things, we treat it like which one? What it resembles most. يُلْحَقُ بِأَقْرَبِهِ مَا شَبَهَ. We give its ruling according to the one it resembles most. So yeah, we're admitting this could be viewed as a loan, and that's why some people are viewing it as a loan. And it could be viewed as a graduate tax or a graduate contribution. Let's take bullet points and tick boxes and see which one it resembles most, and we will see that it resembles a graduate system, a graduate contribution, a takaful system, much, much more than a student loan. And the proof of that is that when the government proposed a takaful system, which is permissible, what changed? Nothing. Which means that in reality, this is already a takaful system, just with different words. A loan makes people scared. A loan makes people stress about paying it off, which means that more of this is going to be covered. Okay, so there are benefits to calling it a loan from a government perspective. And it also means they don't have to add taxes, which people are already complaining about. So when two things resemble each other, we treat it according to the one it resembles most. Allahu A'lam. Yes. Go on, sister.
Assalamu
Alaikum salam.
My question is about the bursaries that the government gave, or the NHS, if you're doing specific courses. So if you're doing a specific course, for example, you're entitled to 2,000 or 5,000 grant. What is the rule of this? Are you able to take it and benefit from it during your studies?
Is it a complete grant?
Yes, it's like a bursary, so you don't need to pay it back.
No issue whatsoever. Absolutely. In fact, the maintenance loan, okay, the maintenance loan, if we go down the route of a graduate contribution system, are we going to say it's really a loan? No, I'm saying in reality it's a grant. It's a grant. And so some people think you distinguish between the tuition fee and the maintenance loan. Both are the same. Both are permissible. There's no difference between them because they're going through the same system. They're going through the same system. And ultimately, you're just going to end up paying tax according to your salary.
Sorry, can you further elaborate the difference between loan and a riba? When the loan turned into a riba? Because there's a lot of confusion where, for argument's sake, like if you borrow me £100 and you put a term and condition that you have to pay me £130 within that small period of time. However, a month or two later you say, you know what, I'm going to change it to £140 back to you.
Why? Because you've delayed?
Not delayed.
Okay.
But after a couple of months, you decide to change it, whatever the agreement you have.
Okay, so what exactly makes riba and different from loans or things? When Allah spoke about riba in the Quran, He assumed and He knew that the Arabs already know what riba is. And He did. And they did. That's why the Quran doesn't explain to them what riba is. Even the Prophet ﷺ barely explains what riba is. Because it was something they were already engaged in. So what was the riba they were engaged in? It's what I mentioned earlier from Zayd ibn Aslam, from the ulama of Medina, the tabi'een. He said that when somebody owes another person money and the time for repayment is due, he says what? He says, either pay me back my money equal the amount that you borrowed, or I'm going to add to it. Now, why is this riba? This is the riba. This is the essence of riba. There are other kinds of riba as well, okay, but this is the type of riba we're concerned about. And this is what some ulama call riba al-Quran. This is the riba that was prohibited by the Quran. So what makes it riba is that when time is due for you to pay, and you're unable to pay, I'm going to increase the amount. That's what makes it riba. Okay? That's what makes it riba. And that's why if we're talking about a system that takes consideration of your circumstances and doesn't require you to pay or increase when you struggle, okay, and it doesn't resemble riba. Yes, by name, a percentage is being added to your overall amount. But in reality, no repayment is required of you. Everything is proportional to your salary. So the issue of dhulm, taking advantage of the weak, taking advantage of people's difficult circumstances, these are all meanings for which riba has been prohibited. None of them, I believe, are present in the student loan system.
If the terms and conditions are fixed, time and the amount, then it should not pass as a riba. However, if there is a...
No. I mean, that's how the Arabs used to do it. But the principle that fuqaha go by is كُلُّ قَرْضٍ جَرَّ نَفْعًا فَهُوَ رِبًا. You say any loan that involves taking profit and benefit counts as riba. So if I say to you, here's £100, in 6 months I want 200, that's riba. Okay, that's riba. Even if you're not struggling, even if me adding counts as riba.
And what if there's commodity involved then?
Well,
Like, for example, earlier you gave an example, a mobile phone. You buy a mobile phone, which is worth £100. And for you to pay an installment, they add another £30.
that's not a loan.
This is what I'm trying to explain. So when...
It'll take long. But yeah, but that won't be a loan. That won't be a loan because there's a difference between I'm selling this to you for a set amount, and I want repayment, and between money and you give me more money, okay, directly out of that. Anything from the sisters?
Two questions, but they seem the same.
Okay. Does the ruling on student loans apply to maintenance loans as well, especially those who take maintenance loan to move out for uni? What did we say? Yes, absolutely the same. There is no difference. It's all through the same system. You can take the maximum student maintenance loan. What if you don't really need it? You still take it and enjoy it. Okay? And invite your friends to the takeout. It's fine. The system is designed like that. This is not me telling you, let's rob the government. The system is designed like that. Okay? The government is fully supporting what I'm saying. Okay? I was going to say I should be the official mufti, then I said no, definitely not. So the point is the system is designed like that. You have the opportunity to benefit from a maintenance loan. It's in reality just support. It's the government funding our education. That's what it is. What does non-profit organization mean? It's a government body. It's a non-profit organization. It's funding people's education. Tuition fee loan, maintenance loan, undergraduate, postgraduate, planning to work, not planning to work, male, female, rich, poor, doesn't matter. It's permissible in essence. Okay, if someone's a multi-millionaire and the government said, anyone whose name ends in S, we're going to give them £1 million. Can you take it or not? Take it. What's the issue? It's a gift. Yeah, so maintenance loans are treated exactly the same. Okay, the other question is the same. Yeah. Yes.
Is it possible, could you just clarify the point that you mentioned with regards to looking at it like a tax and then comparing it with the NHS and police and all that? The thing is, with student loan company, we are borrowing off the money, or as we're taking the money off, and we know there's an increment yearly or monthly, whatever it is. But with NHS and police and all that, we're not really borrowing anything off them. So wouldn't the contract be different in that case?
Yeah. See, this is the point again. The idea of borrowing, we're only saying borrowing because that's a term in the contract. We're only using the word loan because that's mentioned in the contract. But what's its haqiqah? Its haqiqah is there's no borrowing. It's the system providing and funding education. Just as the system, the government, funds people's healthcare. Just as the system funds people for getting access to police service, ambulance service, and so on. It's the same thing. After that, once you start earning money, at a certain threshold, do you pay taxes that go towards the police? Do you pay taxes that go towards the NHS? Yes. Do you pay taxes that go towards funding people's education? Yes. That's it. It's viewed exactly like that. So, if we insist on it being a loan, we're going to have an issue. Because there will always be that problem of I borrowed and I have to pay back. But if we say it's only the word loan is being used, but that's not the haqiqah, we don't think of it as a loan to begin with. And by the way, this is not my suggestion and the suggestion of some mashayikh. There are, and you can do your own research on this, there are several articles by people who are commenting on student loans, not from an Islamic perspective. Why is their perspective important? Even if they're not ulama and fuqaha, their perspective is essential. Because through them we understand the reality of the thing. Okay, and anyone who's an expert in the field, Muslim or non-Muslim. It's through the expert that we understand the reality, then the ruling is based on the reality. So if I'm quoting Martin Lewis here, don't say, what's he got to do? He's not a mufti or a faqih. He is a mufti in finance though. Okay, and other people are, the same is to be said about other people. So if we accept what a lot of finance experts have said, and that is that it's actually a tax, it's actually a graduate contribution, then we're going to move away from the idea of loan altogether and we won't have an issue. Allahu A'lam. There was a question here first and then we'll come to you. You've got a beautiful voice.
So the student finance, you mentioned as a non-government, non-profit organisation. Can they possibly change the contract, or have they changed the contract in the past, either by extending, by reducing the time frame of the repayments, or increase the percentage?
They can and they have, but not on the same plan. So, if you studied after 2012, for example, that's when you started, university, your plan is going to stay the same. The only thing that will change is the threshold, salary threshold. And that's the result of inflation and people's salaries getting higher and living costs getting higher. So the threshold may have been 21,000 before, it was 25,000 after that, and now it's up to 27,000. Give it a few years, that threshold's probably going to go up to 30,000. Okay? So that's changing, but that doesn't impact the ruling. Yeah? Just the threshold is changing, and that's in people's interest because the threshold's getting higher and higher. As for the 30-year period, let's say tomorrow they made it 40 years, which they're doing with the new plans, no impact. Because we're saying that overall this is not a loan. So even if they tweaked some things here and there, it doesn't change things. But if they change the system as a whole, okay, and said, no, this is a debt that stays with you, that you're responsible for paying off regardless of financial circumstances. And if not, then you need someone to be a kafil, a signatory, like your parents or partner or someone, and they will have to be responsible for, then now it's okay, no, hold on, this is a different system now. Now this needs new investigation, looking into it further. But if they're just tweaking things here and there like that, that doesn't impact the rule.
Oh, yeah.
The question about the narration that you just mentioned now, we compare...
About who?
Zayd.
Zayd ibn Aslam.
Yeah. So, let's say the tuition fee is 9,000. You pay today, don't pay nothing extra. You go out the money, they'll pay for you, but in a few years' time, the money goes up. So, is it not a type of riba comparing to the narration of
Say that again. Didn't get it. The question is, let's set the scenario. If you pay we're going to pay on your behalf.
Okay.
As a government, we're going to pay £9,000, for example, on your behalf. In a few years' time, that 9,000 is no longer 9,000. It's going to be 17,000, whatever. It's going up all the time. Isn't that the type of riba?
But what's going up here? How much you're expected to pay back, or the tuition fees are going up?
No, how much do you expect to pay back?
Yeah, but that is the system right now.
Yeah. He's saying isn't that type of riba?
So that is the system right now, where the total that you're supposed to pay back is going up. And that's why I say again, and this is every time I talk about this is why I have to re-emphasize the point that it isn't a loan. It is called a loan, but what matters is the reality of something. With the incident or the example of Zayd ibn Aslam describing how people used to take riba from each other in Jahiliyyah, these are genuine loans. These are genuine loans. If you come to somebody and say, I don't have the money, well, pay me afterwards, but with riba. Are they going to say after a period of time, if you keep doing that, you're excused? No. Are they going to say, even if you die, still pay it off? They might let you off, and that doesn't change it from being a qard. But we're saying the system as a whole here, called a loan, and it's not a loan. There is no interest involved because there is no loan. And if there's no loan, and there's no debt, and there's no repayment, there's no riba. So don't look at the numbers. Don't look at the numbers. Just like you don't look at the numbers with NHS treatment. Okay? I only go to hospital. I've only been to hospital once in my life. But I'm paying so much in taxes every year. So, this is not a loan. It's a tax. Okay, so the same applies to the student loan system. Allahu Akbar. Yes?
You mentioned that there was a sheikh who disagreed with the argument you brought forth. So, did you give a reason as to why he disagreed, or was it just...
His reason is that he's still convinced it's a loan. He's convinced that it's a loan. And when I discussed this with him, he said, and these loans are causing people stress and people are in debt. I didn't have a back and forth, I'm not going to turn it into a debate, but for me that was never convincing. In fact, I know that the only reason people stress out about loans is because they don't understand them. Otherwise, in reality, no. I mean, what comes into your salary every month, that's what you live by, isn't it? You might not even know how much you're paying in tax. Hands up if you know precisely what you're paying every month in tax. Maybe a few of you. Okay, I'm too embarrassed to put their hands up. Some of you may be accountants or something. Kaka. This guy's funding the government, mashallah. He's not just... So, people don't pay much attention to precisely what's coming out. They're going with what comes into their account. Student loans are the same. They're exactly the same. So, yes, there is some disagreement. And I spoke to Mufti Abdurrahman Mangera as well, who, previously made a video about it being prohibited. But he was traveling. He said, I can't get back to you right now. But not a single scholar that I communicated with and explained this to disagreed with me, except that one. Alhamdulillah. Have you asked one already? Khalas, we'll have him first. Sisters, you are welcome, of course, if you do have any questions.
Yeah, so the question I wanted to ask, how about if you have like 2 jobs and then you just receive a salary from one job, but the other job you maybe have a cash in your hand or something?
That's there's a difference.
Well, yeah, you still benefited from the government where you studied, but you're still using the knowledge that you gained.
Yeah, I mean, either way, whatever you're earning, whatever is taxable by law, that may have an impact on student loans if it reaches the threshold. Even if you have 2 jobs, they will still look at those 2 jobs. As for benefiting and finding loopholes in tax, well, that's another discussion. I'm not going to go into now. Yes.
Jazakallah khairan for the insightful talk. My question is, what if I decide to leave the UK as soon as I graduate and work abroad?
Still required to pay.
So do you tell them how much you earn?
Yeah. So there's a way of going about communicating your salary abroad, and there are different thresholds, slightly different rules apply, but they are expecting to, So, and that's a good question. Someone say, but hold on, that means you're in a different country and paying tax there, but then you're still paying this. But what you're paying is going where? Education. So you're still contributing to the pot. Yeah? And that's why when we describe it as a takaful system, like many ulama did, that doesn't matter whether you're abroad or in person. Okay? It's a graduate pot that you're contributing towards. You benefited from the system, contribute something back to the system, and other people benefit from free education after you. That's it.
I don't think they chase you if you live abroad and ask you to pay because like if you go to some countries where there is no income tax, there's nothing to tell. As long as you're not earning in this country, you don't have to pay. That's just what
They do require it. Yeah. Whether they communicate with you, whether you decide to ignore them, that's another, that's a different issue. But in terms of the, system, they do expect you to communicate. If you don't communicate, then I think they set a specific amount that automatically you're required to pay monthly. Wallahu a'lam. Any final comments or yeah?
My question is, the European Council, Islamic Council, they already gave fatwa that this is a loan, but it's a necessity that Muslims can take benefits. Yes. And you took a different approach. Yes. Have they discussed this one, or this is today first time? Have they discussed and they decided it's a loan? Or this is you or other man?
So the European Council?
If it is look that angle, or this is totally new?
So I spoke to the former president. In fact, I spoke to 2 former presidents of the European Council, Fatwa and Research, Shaykh Zahed Fettah and Shaykh Abdullah Juday'. Okay, both of them senior fuqaha in this country. Shaykh Abdullah Juday' said, I agree with you word for word. So he says, I know the European Council took the route of necessity, but I don't agree with it. Okay, so they initially adopted that approach. But I looked at another fatwa of the European Council, and they seem to allude towards this as well. It being like a tax. Shaykh Suhaib Hassan didn't comment in too much detail, but he said this is he thanked me for the summary and said this would resolve a big problem for Muslims. So the official fatwa that was previously given by the council doesn't mean that every member in the council agrees with it. And a lot of the mashayikh, when they looked further into student loans, changed their attitude towards it. They didn't view it as a loan anymore. And many of the people I communicated with were like that. Because it's easy to just assume it's a loan. They're calling it a loan, they're calling it debt. That's the first step anyone's going to take. But further investigation, hopefully changes that. Allahu A'lam.
شيخ زاهد هل ممكن تعطي ملخص سريع جدا يعني مثل السيناريو مثلا اللي يلخص لنا بعض الاخوه جمهور الاخرين فسالوا هل في الاخير يعني الشيخ حلال ولا حرام؟ اي نعم.
This might benefit also later if you want to crop this part as a separate section. So in summary, we said that Islam came to benefit people, not to harm people, right? We said the default rule of all transactions is permissibility, unless there is clear proof that it's haram. And it has to be clear proof that it's haram. We also said that what matters is the reality of a thing, not the terms being used, the words being used. Okay? Call yourself male or female, that's fine. But the reality is what? That's what matters. And that's what we'll decide ahkam on and different rulings on. Okay? So what matters is the reality. Although the student loan system in the UK is called by people a loan system, government officials, writers on finance, specialists in economy and finance, many of them have pointed out that although it's like a loan, in reality it's more of a graduate contribution system or a graduate tax system. Which means that in reality what's happening is that the student loans company, which is a government body, okay, a government organization, the student loans company is funding people's education who need that funding, who want that funding. Later on, if you start to earn a higher salary above a certain threshold, instead of paying your usual taxes, you're going to pay a slightly higher rate in taxes. And that addition is going to go back to the student loans company. They will then use that to fund future students. Okay? And so if it's not in reality a loan, and if it's not in reality a debt, you don't have debt. It's called debt, but there's no debt in reality. Okay? If you have £15 million in student loans debt, that means nothing. Because what matters is your salary and how much you end up paying. Now, if your annual salary is 450 million per year, then you might end up paying all of that. Okay? So what matters is salary. That's what you're paying. That's what you're paying your graduate tax or graduate contribution on. So if there is no loan, and if there is no debt, and if there's no dhulm involved, no taking advantage of people's circumstances, no taking advantage of the weak, and it's a system which supports the vast majority of people, then it doesn't resemble riba. And it doesn't resemble a loan. And therefore it's permissible. There's no riba, there's no interest to begin with. And this applies to the maintenance loan and the tuition fee loan. It applies to postgraduate and undergraduate tuition and maintenance fee loans as well. And like I said, I'm here speaking about a topic that concerns the wider Muslim community. I don't want to jump into this on my own, as Zahed Fettah on my own. So I made sure before I spoke to consult at least 10 different people of knowledge in the field. People of fiqh who've been giving fatwa for decades. And like I said to you, alhamdulillah, almost all of them had zero objection to anything that I said. Some of them, senior mashayikh, many of you guys already know. So in summary, that's the position. And actually the British Board of Scholars and Imams have also published an article, quite a lengthy one, and you can find it online, where they basically take this route as well. They present different opinions too, and they take this route. So that's in summary that student loans are permissible. They're not just permissible out of necessity. They're not just permissible if you're struggling financially. They're absolutely permissible for all people, undergraduate loans, postgraduate loans, and the maintenance loans as well. Allahu a'lam. Any final comments or questions before we wrap up for Asr? Yeah.
Should I request that we do similar thing for insurances and mortgages and have another lecture going into these?
Possibly. Jazakallah khair. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll try to make it a regular program where we cover different topics. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.